Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays, or welcome to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays. This is our second episode of the day. Earlier today, if you haven't seen it, check it out in the top right corner. We reviewed our first episode of Moon Knight. It was a spoiler review, so go check it out. If you're just tuning in now, this is our review. It's going to be non-spoilers with some spoilers at the end, so we will let you know when the spoilers come in. But for Morbius, which is the longly awaited Marvel film that was announced before the pandemic was supposed to come out, was delayed because of the pandemic, was then delayed again, and delayed again, and delayed again. So much so that we were ready to record an episode about it in January, and then they moved it again to April, and now we finally got it, and it exists, and it's out there, and we're going to talk about it. Kelsey, co-host Kelsey, how are you doing? Are you excited to talk about Morbius? Are you...
Dill, I have been so curious to have this conversation with you since I saw this. I saw it on Friday night. There was actually like a decent amount of people in the crowd
They're
on Friday
hungry for
night.
superhero movies, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
and
and I gotta say, I do think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Michael Keaton was in the trailer, and everyone just wants to know, how is this connected to Spider-Man? And I
oh, he
really just think,
was?
yeah, and we'll talk about it, because the shot of him in the trailer was not
Oh, yeah.
used in the movie, and several shots from the trailer were not used in the movie, which we'll also get into. But continue with what you were saying. But I think a lot of the draw was because people were like, it's going to tie into Spider-Man. How? Let's find out.
And let me just tell you, I walked out of the theater. Well, like I told like a few people, like I was like, "Oh, I'm going to see Morbius," and everyone was like, "Oh, I heard it's not that good." And then and I walked out of the theater and I was like, "Am I dumb?" Because I didn't hate that movie.
Okay.
I
Well,
didn't think it was that bad. I had a time. I had a time.
I think it's really one of those things where it's like expectation versus reality. Like if you're expecting the worst thing ever, I think it's a little bit more like, oh, like that wasn't the worst thing ever. But I think
Sure.
if you're going into it being like, we got another Marvel movie in theaters, and like, I think it's going to be a disappointment. And the numbers show, I just looked at it, it's got a 17 on Rotten Tomatoes now, pretty low score, being hailed as one of the worst comic book movies of recent. But I think the thing that Morbius is missing, and I honestly think this is one of the biggest negatives, is that a lot of the times when comic book movies really blunder, it's like, it's almost so disastrous that we kind of almost laugh at it, and it almost becomes enjoyable because it's bad. This is one of those movies that I think is just not very good, but also like not jokingly so. Not you can't like watch it and laugh at it. It's more of you just kind of watch it. You just hit your
I
head on the
just
mic.
I hit my head on my own
but
microphone.
but I think
Sorry.
this is one of those movies that I almost wish it had been worse, so that way you could at least like be entertained in how bad it was. But here it was this weird middle ground where like I didn't think it was a good movie. I didn't think it was well made. I think the visuals are weird. I think that the overall blue hue is bad. We'll get into the details, but like, I'll say right now, I don't really enjoy Jared Leto as an actor, so I think that has a
Okay.
big thing to do with it as well. But then like it doesn't have that extra like novelty factor that some bad movies do, where it's like Batman and Robin is a famous
Like
example
it's
of something
not
that is so
camp.
bad. Exactly, it's not camp. It's just, it takes itself way too seriously, and I think that actually works against it. But let's
Okay.
kind of get into the crux of it, because you always like prepare like either a summary, but can you tell us? I don't know if you prepared one, but like tell us what the movie's about, just the general gist for those people listening.
Well, it's an origin story. I didn't write one
Right.
officially, as I normally
Yeah.
do, but it's an origin story about Michael Morbius and how he is trying to find a cure for he has like a, a disability of some kind, a
Mhm.
life-threatening disability, and it's about his mission to find himself a cure for him and his friend. And he finds that cure through bats, and the only downside to his cure is that he has to feed it, like, he has to feed, this monster within him now with blood.
Yeah. So he basically becomes a vampire, and
Yeah.
that's kind of it. I mean, like it really just kind of thrusts you into it like right away. It doesn't
Yeah.
take really a lot of time to really develop the characters, and I don't think it necessarily needs to, because nowadays, everything's based off of a comic book, and like people can just read it if they want to know what the character's gist is. You can read about it. We talked about Moon Knight, how it just kind of throws you into it. I don't think that's
Mhm.
necessarily a negative in general, but I think in this particular case, we're really supposed to care about the central relationship. It almost reminded me of like this Loki Thor dynamic. Like you're closer when you're little, but something when you get older tears you apart. And here it kind of becomes more of a jealousy of like, well, no, Michael is now like able to do this and able to do that. I want that. It's almost like a jealousy
Mhm.
that Matt Smith's character has. Yeah, the film stars Jared Leto, Jared Harris, Matt Smith, Tyrese. It's directed by Daniel Espinoza, who let me just pull up a couple of his other credits just to give him credits. Safe House, Life, the Ryan Reynolds, Jake Gyllenhaal space movie where that like
Mm.
Venom like thing, started eating people and people thought, oh, it's going to be a Venom movie, and then they were let down when it was just a space movie because everything
Yeah.
has to be a comic book movie apparently nowadays. But yeah, so that's the creative team behind it. Yeah, I think if they had spent a little bit more time investing us in this relationship, it probably would have worked best. But I think the movie really is as strong or as weak as your leading player. And I think if you are on board with Jared Leto as a person or not, I don't think it really matters here because I don't think he does anything very interesting with the performance. You know what I mean? It's very much
Okay.
like a role where you could kind of go batshit crazy, no pun intended, bat. Like you can go batshit crazy with it if you have like a really wild, zany actor in the role, or you can be so dark, mysterious, and brooding with it. But I feel like he's almost kind of that middle area where Jared Leto himself is a little bit more like dark, brooding, mysterious, but he doesn't really bring that to the role. It almost feels like he's kind of just like reading the lines and getting through it. Whereas I feel like other people are trying their best to at least kind of like act, and he's just kind of like saying the lines. And I think some of the disservice is because of the editing, because we've seen in the trailers, there's a really funny joke where he like goes, "I am Venom," and he's like, "Ah, I'm just kidding, Michael Morbius, sir." And it's like that's not in the movie. They cut that
Yeah.
line. And it's like one of
Yeah.
those things where it's like, why are you taking the humor out of him? If anything, he needs more humor to make him more
Mm.
of a well-rounded character, or they need to give him some other something to make him more of a well-rounded character. Because at the point where he's, going through all this stuff, it's like the character just didn't really reel me in. Like I wasn't attached to this character whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. Jill, you were saying before, like, all the things that you kind of felt was kind of weird with it. Like, I don't know, those are the things that I kind of really liked. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
I liked how there was like it's all very like there's a theme, there's an atmosphere to like every shot, and
Yeah.
like, they kind of have like a texture
Yeah.
or
It
a
does.
filter of some
It
sort
yeah,
on,
it does feel very uniform in its style. I do give it that. Like I think they
Yeah.
did still commit to a certain style. It's just I think I don't know. It just the style I think was a little too drab to like liven thing. Like I just wish this was a little livelier because it's about a vampire. Like I remember the animated series, Spider-Man series. It was like Morbius because apparently eating blood and sucking people's blood was like too graphic. He had like these little like almost like suction cup like things on his hands that he would drain blood with that almost made him a little spookier and crazier. Like I wish they went a little
Oh.
crazier with him because we see something like Venom, and I think this is the best thing to compare it to. Venom, they're not great movies per se, but they're so entertaining because the characters are committed. They feel larger than life. They really just kind of go outside the box with them, especially with the main character itself. Like Eddie Brock is batshit, and I just wish
Yeah.
this had gone a little bit further like Venom, where it's like we're not going to be telling an Oscar-winning story like Logan or like Black Panther, but what we're going to tell is going to be entertaining. And I just
Yeah.
didn't think they did that necessarily, but
Sure. No, I'm not disagreeing. What I'll this is what I'll do. I'll tell you everything that I liked about it, and then I do, have some critiques. I
cool.
I didn't
Yeah.
think that this was a perfect
Yes.
movie.
Start off with what you do like about it, because I do think you were obviously more positive on it than I was, because I really
Yeah.
am really struggling to find like something I actually genuinely liked about it. And
Okay.
that's not, but it's also like one of those things where I wish it was like so bad that I could like enjoy the badness, but it's just kind of like it's the worst kind of bad. It's boring to me, but I'd love to hear your positives because maybe it'll make me think differently on it.
No, but I totally get where you're coming from as
Yeah.
well. Um, well, I for one, like I was saying with Moonlight earlier, is that like I love a good refreshing action sequence that doesn't feel like anything that I've
Hmm.
seen before. And I definitely do think that they had an interesting take with, giving him this kind of effect that followed him everywhere whenever
Hmm.
he kind of took on like the full like Morbius um form, I guess, and like they kind of had this like mist effect following him everywhere, and like his movements went from like super sharp and like really like bat like and precise and
Yeah.
everything, and they would have like these slow-mo shots. I think they handled this really well in the beginning of the movie when they were, we watched him like dodge that bullet, like a bullet like flew by,
Mhm.
and they had a really nice like slow-mo
Yeah.
moment of that. And going off of that in these action sequences, I loved how sometimes the camera, like the cinematography, took on like a point of view angle where all of a sudden now we, the audience members, were the guy getting attacked, and we would see just like flashes of like his
Mhm.
claws and like his face
Right.
and all that stuff. And I
Yeah.
thought that that was like interesting because it was different. It was unique,
Yeah.
you know?
I do think one particular scene I did like that now that I'm thinking about it, I was like, see, it sparked
Okay.
something. There's one thing I
Here you
liked,
go.
and it was this hallway sequence where it's this really long hallway. There's this woman,
Yes.
and the lights are kind of flickering on and off. It's a very, reused horror trope every now and then. The lights
Yes.
go off and the lights come on and he's there. But in this case, the lights go off, the lights go on, he's still not there. It's like it flickers a few times and then the lights are on and she just turns around, he's not there, turns back around again and he's there. And it almost made me wish that they went really hard into the horror angle. It almost feels like they didn't want to commit one solid direction. Like, let's make it a campy kind of
Sure.
Venom thing. Let's make it a horror film. Let's make it a like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like kind of melodramatic, like uh, vampire romp. Like, it didn't feel like it
Sure.
belonged in any one of those categories. It was trying to have everything, but not fully commit to anything at the same time. You know what I mean?
I
Because the
Yeah.
action was interesting at times, but it was like not interesting enough to make it, groundbreaking. You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. I honestly think that they would have really done well if they just went full horror because, like,
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
when he becomes Morbius, when he becomes like his full vampiric form, like
Mhm.
he is very scary looking.
Yeah,
Like it's terror. It's like, it's
yeah.
scary. It's unsettling.
And we'll
You
talk about
almost
the
don't want to
post.
look at him.
Yeah, we'll talk about the post credits later or soon. But I think also another thing is that like if you want to commit to Morbius being a villain, then like don't give him a villain. Instead, make him the villain and make like someone else the more protagonist.
Sure.
Or don't try to hype Morbius up as this future Spider-Man villain then, and instead
Mm,
hype up Matt Smith's character maybe as that, and have Morbius be almost like this good Dracula. Because I also think that's another trap that a lot of movies that are featuring villains in the lead, like Joker or like Venom, even you have to be able to say this is a hero or this is a villain. Venom is easy because Brock is a hero, Venom is a villain, but even by the second movie, Venom is more heroic than villainous, and Carnage is the villain, which I think that's a cool approach they've taken. But like
yeah.
Morbius, it's like, is he a villain? Is he supposed to, like, what is he? Like, are we supposed to root for him as a protagonist? Are we supposed to see him as a villain, even though he's fighting his own villain? And that's another thing that's tough too when you're trying to do all these spin-offs of Spider-Man villains without Spider-Man there. Like it makes it very hard to figure out exactly where Morbius lies in the hero to villain spectrum. And
Yeah.
then when they do commit to saying he's more of a hero, and we'll get to it, the post credits kind of takes all that, throws it out the window. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. I I will say, Dill, my favorite moment in this film was when he's really like honing in his powers in like his laboratory, and he's like
Mhm.
vibing out his like echolocation that he has now with
Yeah.
like his ears, and how they added that like texture whenever he's using
Yeah,
it.
the visual effects
and
were good. Yeah.
and yeah, visual effects were really fun in this movie, I think.
Mhm.
And it's just like it was super interesting to watch him kind of like really test the waters himself. Like it feels like there's always like the mentor like trope, like to guide these characters throughout like figuring out what their powers are and what they can do. But he was really just like doing it all himself, which I
Mhm.
thought was, interesting because, he's a smart guy, he's a
Yeah.
doctor.
Right.
So, that was fun to watch. Um, yeah, that was definitely my favorite part when he's
What do
like
you?
when he has the ball and he's like throwing
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
What do you think of Jared Leto as a performer? Because I think almost like he is the perfect casting choice because he can go crazy. Because like
Yeah.
Jared Leto, as we know, is a method actor. He sent used condoms to Margot Robbie in the mail when he did Suicide Squad, which is icky and gross. But like, did it make his Joker kind of unhinged? And would it have worked in a better movie? Maybe. But like, he has this reputation for playing these really eccentric characters. House of Gucci too. He's the one that going like this. While everyone else is doing a real accent, he's doing a this. He's Mario, and it's
Mm.
like where is that Jared Leto here? Like this is the role
Yeah.
to go unhinged. Did you get that? Like do you like Jared Leto as an actor? Do you like him in this? Like where do you fall on his performance?
Dill, whenever I walk away from a movie and I can't find something to complain about it, I find that to be a win. Like,
Mhm,
did I think that it was an exceptional performance? Like, no.
mhm,
But did I ever like I don't know. I agree with you. I think
yeah,
that when we heard that he was playing Morbius, we were all kind of worried that maybe he was going to make it like too campy or too ridiculous, that it was going to be unbelievable, and maybe the fact that he didn't do that was his version of giving a more believable
maybe,
performance or
maybe,
what have you.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
It
there's
kind of
one thing that you can't say that Jared Leto doesn't commit to a bit. You know what I mean? S-
Yeah, and here I didn't feel like he was. Like I feel like he
Yeah.
could have committed more, but I think it's also goes back to my whole idea of like if you're gonna be bad, be unabashedly, unashamedly bad. But if you're gonna be, and I feel like it's almost like one of those things where if the performance isn't gonna be like an all-time great, like Tom Hardy in Venom, like even Tom Holland in Spider-Man, all three Spider-Men, like Oscar Isaac that we just saw in Moon Knight. If you're not gonna transcend the material, then you have to be the total opposite and be so like laughably bad that it's entertaining. Whereas I feel like Jared Leto's just completely in the middle ground here, where like he doesn't elevate the material like so many other superheroes as of late. Elizabeth Olsen in WandaVision, Paul Bettany in WandaVision, like so many people, Simu Liu, like so many people have been doing. And I think that's just what it is. It's when you compare it to everything else, it's like they all elevate their material even beyond what it is, which is already pretty great. You know what I mean?
You know what it felt like, Jill? It felt like when I was watching him that he was really just trying to humanize Michael Morbius. Like
Mm-hmm.
he was really just trying to find the really human elements in him, when
Right.
it's like, well, when you're playing like a character from a comic book, like you kind of have to make it like a little bit more exaggerated, a little more heightened, a little bit
Yeah.
less realistic than you
True.
would play just like every other person. So it
Right.
almost felt like like you said, it almost felt like he was just taking it just a tad bit too seriously, and that
Yeah.
did not play in his favor at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
Um,
Whereas the opposite is with House of Gucci. It feels like everyone else is taking it too seriously, but he understands the assignment. But because he's the only one who does understand the assignment, he sticks out like a sore thumb, which is why he gives a bad
yeah,
performance in that movie because he's not on the
yeah,
same page as anyone else. But
yeah.
I don't know.
But my one complaint about not Jared Leto specifically,
Yeah.
but when he wasn't Morbius, when they didn't when they weren't CGIing his face to be
Hmm.
all scary and dark, they almost made him look too pretty, too attractive. So, I mean, maybe that was purposeful, so the contrast would be super apparent, but it looked like he was honestly all wearing bronzer the
I think
entire
that's just
movie.
Jared Leto, and that's the thing. I think that's where the method comes in because he's just Jared Leto in those sequences. I don't know.
But I will say though, Dill, you were talking a lot about how you weren't sure if he was a hero or a villain. And I really did write down in my notes, I'm like, I don't think he's not really a hero. I think he's just a guy doing everything he can not to be a villain.
Right.
Does
Yeah.
that make
No, that
sense?
that makes sense. But then when we'll get to it, then the post credit scene is where it kind of just goes nuts for me. And is it time to talk about those? Because I think honestly, this is like a bad movie that it just kind of boring to me the whole way through. But then once those post credits rolled around, that's really where I was like, what are they,
Yeah.
what?
Well,
So
first let me tell
before
you
we get into
everything
that, yeah,
about
like, give me some.
let me tell
Yeah.
you about everything that I just didn't like. So, as much as I love the cinematography and I thought that some of the shots were really hit the mark, I think that they also missed the mark on a lot of moments in the film.
Mm,
And the slow-mo moments were like I said in
cool.
the beginning,
Yeah.
were really cool. But then the more they were utilized in the film, I feel like the less they were understanding the purpose for them,
Yeah.
because there were a few moments, there was a point in the subway fight when he's fighting with Matt Smith's character, who everyone called Milo, and his name wasn't Milo.
Yeah.
The doctor, that
It almost
bothered me so much.
it almost feels like they wrote a script and then they wrote another script and then they forgot to edit some lines from the first script. So like sometimes they're calling him Milo, sometimes they're calling him something else. And I don't even remember his real name because they called him Milo so much, but I remember him even being like, "Call me this," and then they
Yeah.
didn't.
No,
But then they
literally.
do it like once or twice, so then it takes you out of it. Yeah, and I think another thing before you get on to the rest, I think
Yeah.
another thing is with every delay, they must have changed stuff because there's stuff that was in the trailer that didn't end up here. And I think the more time you have with
Right.
a movie that isn't great, the more room there is for error. The thing is, if a
Right.
movie's not great, like Venom, movie's not great, but you throw it out in theaters and there are actually some redeeming qualities to it. The performance is fun, it's kind of campy, it's a little messy, but at the end of the day, we're entertained. But when you spend this much time delaying it, it's kind of what you thought about New Mutants. That movie got delayed so much that by the time the final product came out, it just feels like a mismatched conglomeration of a bunch of different threads. And it's like,
Mhm.
it almost makes you wonder, what would this have looked like 2 years ago compared to now? Like, how many choices and changes did they make? And we know, just because one of the post-credit scene was done completely in voiceover, that they definitely added stuff last minute, based on reception to Spider-Man No Way Home, which we'll get to. But like, it's just so interesting to see how it would be so interesting to see how this movie evolved, because where it ended up, I can't believe that being the initial vision, because of the inaccuracy of calling him Milo or this other name. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was just it was like it was a childhood nickname that like Michael gave him, and then just like everyone started calling like the doctor who like ran the facility in Greece started calling him Milo, and I was like, that is fully just not his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, that
But
is
yeah,
like the
I just read
name
it
of
right here. It says right here, a rich man originally named Lucian who suffers from a rare blood disease as Michael, but he's credited as Milo Morbius. So I really don't understand it. I don't know.
that I don't understand it either. So there was like a moment when they were fighting where they used the slow-mo feature, and like the moment that they picked was like so weak. It was like not a cool action moment. Like it was literally it was like a punch was being like prepared and not being thrown. Like you
Yeah,
know what I mean? It was just like it was
it
getting
would just
sometimes it was at
yeah,
points it was like kind of awkward.
it'd be like
Like
if we were just
even
talking in the middle of the podcast and it just happened in the
no.
middle and it didn't make sense.
Yeah, it's like, what were you highlighting in that moment? Because I'm not sure. Like,
Yeah,
uh,
style for the sake of style, not substance, basically.
no, yeah, for sure. And then, okay, so like your favorite moment was the hallway scene, and I was like, I was very into this moment as well. And then, like, the big jump scare that we were all waiting for was his hand coming up to choke her when it should have just been one of those like classic, like, oh, I'm looking this way, nothing's there. I turn, boom, something's in my face that we all know and love because they
Yeah,
work every time. Where this
for better
one,
or worse. Yeah,
it's like she was fully facing the direction where, like, you know, Milo would have been to grab her throat, so she would have seen him. Like,
yeah.
it's like, was she blind in that moment that she just, like, didn't see the hand come up to grab her? Like, it was a very weak choice for a jump scare, and it wasn't even that
Mhm.
scary, so I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh,
especially
you
given
missed."
the good lead up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, you missed a really good opportunity there. That was a missed opportunity." And then oh, yeah, and then, like, randomly, like, they had, like, this establishing shot of the city, of, like, you know, the city skyline, like, everything's it was at night, so it was, like, all the cities, like, lit up with lights, and then all of a sudden, like, this, like, he the camera takes us above, like, the clouds, so we can't even see the city anymore. Like, I was like, "Now I'm just looking at clouds. Why did you use this shot?" It was just some of
Kels,
it.
I think you're making more and more of a case for why this is not the best thing in the world, and
Listen, I
why.
never said it was the best
No, I know,
thing,
I
but
know, I know.
I walked out of that movie and I was not that mad or disappointed as like
No.
for the rest of the weekend I'm on TikTok and everyone's telling me about how bad Morbius was, and I was like, "Did we see the same movie?" Because I did not think it was that bad.
I don't know. No, it's
I
like the
was
clouds.
I'm just looking at clouds. And then one thing I it might be a spoiler so we can
Is it
talk
post
about it
credits?
after. It's not post credits, but it happens at the end of the
All right.
movie,
So why don't
which
we?
is what I was upset about.
So before we get into spoilers, just blanket thoughts one
Oh
last
my
time for anyone
god.
who's gonna tune out. I did not like this movie. Kelsey didn't hate it as much as other people, but she also didn't love this movie. So is it a recommendation from me? No, and I really don't think you need to see it to understand any other future movies, because who knows what the hell they're doing with that end credit scene, which we'll get to. But any last words before we get into spoiler territory, Kelsey?
Um, you know, go see it and decide for yourself. Choose your own
Okay.
adventure.
or don't, or just don't see it
Or
and
just
spend your
don't.
time doing something better. Watch Moon Knight again. Anyway, we're now at spoilers. I put the spoiler ban there on YouTube. If you're listening, let me tell you right now, 25 minutes in, there are spoilers from here on out. Kelsey, what were your thoughts on the ending that you were going to say?
Okay, so at the end, when Martine, the love
Yes,
interest of the movie,
I know
is
where you're going.
dying,
I know where you're
she
going.
takes a bite out of his lip, swallows some of his DNA, and then he bites her. And like the whole thing is like, as soon as I saw that happen, I was like, okay, she's gonna turn into a vampire. So then the entire time I'm waiting for that reveal, and they picked the weirdest moment to
Yes.
go back to her for her to like wake up
And it
and
was
be
like
a
a split
vampire.
second too. It was like in the midst of like him flying with all these bats, and
Yes.
then it just like
Yes.
pans to her, and she opens her eyes like the end of Avatar, and then it pans back to Morbius, and it's like, wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait, but she just woke up. What's going on?
No, yeah. It was just such a weak, it was just that moment was weak sauce. Like
Yeah,
it
that whole
it
romance
should
is
have
weak
been
to me.
more
It's like,
dramatic,
yeah,
more, you know,
yeah, it
maybe
was
it
like,
should have ended on her waking up. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
they spent so much time like kind of like being like, if will they, won't they, but they never really committed one way or the other until the very end. But then by then it was like kind of over anyway. Like I just, that romance didn't work for me either, and because I think
Yeah.
she was giving away more than Jared Leto was. But let's talk about these post credits, because
Yeah.
as much as it's like exciting to see Michael Keaton and like, oh cool, we're connecting this to other things, I think this was the lamest attempt at universe building I've ever seen. Because first off,
Yeah.
we see the thing in the sky that we know is from No Way Home, which had to have
Mhm.
been added in the last 3 months. So in January, when it was going to come out, they probably put it in after that, or maybe it was put in before that. I don't know, but they do this thing, and then apparently Michael Keaton is now in this universe when he was
Mhm.
in Tom Holland's universe. So everyone else is coming into Tom's universe except he's going out of it, I guess, and into Morbius's universe. Or are they all getting
Yeah.
put in? Because we didn't see Morbius jump anywhere. Anyway, Michael Keaton is now in this universe. So we have the Disney MCU and then we have the Sony verse, let's say. So Michael Keaton was in the Disney MCU, now he's in the Sony verse. Great, whatever. Now that he's here, he wants to team up Sinister Six, whatever, with Morbius, who we just kind of rooted for the whole last hour of the movie. Now is apparently
Mhm.
going to be a Spider-Man villain when we have seen nothing of Spider-Man this whole movie, despite the trailers having several shots of posters saying Spider-Man wanted, and a shot of Michael Keaton in the trailer that was not in the post-credit scene. And then we get another post-credit scene of the Vulture in his costume, and it's very clearly a Michael Keaton voiceover because the audio mixing is way off, and the Vulture's just kind of doing his hokey little this, and it doesn't match any of the verbiage that he's saying, um, and it just kind of felt like why, just why, like are they
Mm.
really that confident that people are gonna love this movie, that people are gonna want to see more of Morbius, or is it just like, well, we got to put a post credit somewhere, like also whose universe are they building on, because this isn't in the MCU, so like are they going to face off against Andrew's Spider-Man, Toby's Spider-Man? Is this going to be its own thing? Are we going to get another Spider-Man? Like it was just so confusing to me, where I was like, why are we even doing this? Like there's no need. If you want to have them team up, fine, but like plan it out better, because it felt very much like they said, you know what, let's 3 more months, let's get Michael Keaton in here, let's record a few things and like add this post credit scene now that like the multiverse is a thing, and it just felt
No,
way
yeah.
too just thrown in there. What are your thoughts on this post credit scene? Like help me make sense of it, because I don't really understand where they're really going with it, especially now that it's getting panned and not doing amazingly well at the box office. It's like, are they really in need of a new Morbius movie? Like, is this going to actually pan out, or is this going to be a complete clunky misfire, just like some uh, franchises end up being?
No, yeah. Like it was definitely weird. It was definitely, hold on, I'm sorry. My microphone is doing such weird things tonight. It's like
Not
not
the
staying
weirdest thing
still.
we're talking about tonight.
Oh, seriously. Oh my god. There we go. That's better. I mean, it's a little too tall for me, but whatever. It was weird. It was definitely confusing. Like, as I interpreted it as like, oh, Doctor Strange was trying his best to like keep people out. So he might have like accidentally sent like people who knew Peter Parker to a different universe. And as we know from Spider-Man Homecoming, like, oh, he did figure out Spider-Man's identity. He did figure out that it was
Sure.
Peter because Peter took Liz to the dance.
Right.
So I guess now, but since doing the spell, I guess now he has like his memory's been wiped, that it was Peter Parker, because that was the whole point of that, the
Mhm.
whole ending of No Way Home. And so now he's in the Morbius universe. He's not a criminal in this universe, so he's out of jail. They're like, "Oh, this guy's not supposed to be here. Let's get him out of jail and back onto the streets." What
Yeah.
made me laugh about this post-credit scene, Dill, is that he's in a different universe. He's like, he could be like, you know what? I'm gonna be a good person. Like, I'm gonna get my life on track. Like, I'm gonna do the right thing. No, he jumps right back into the same shit. He said, "New universe, same me. I'm finding the first garage I see. I'm tinkering. I'm building my silly little vulture wings, the same wings that I had in the last universe. And I'm like meeting the first bad guy I see to be like, yo, me, you, team. Let's do
Yeah,
this."
it was just so yeah, it was so dumb. Like I really do think like there's a time and place for franchise building, and when they did it in the first phase of the MCU, when Nick Fury approached everyone, they had it all mapped out. They
Mhm.
had phase 1 mapped out. They said this is how we're going to do it. Captain America's going to get frozen in time. Nick Fury's going to approach Iron Man. Iron Man's going to approach Bruce Banner. We'll introduce Natasha and Iron Man 2. It was all thought out. Thor will come right in. This one, it just feels like, oh, that movie was a big hit. Okay, so like, let's try to set up a Sinister Six, and like, oh wait, but like, all those villains are now like, we just saw Green Goblin, Doc. You know what? We didn't use Vulture. Let's get him in this. Oh, but we got to
Mm.
make him go to Morbius's universe. Oh, and Venom's there too. And again, Venom I think was a letdown in No Way Home because we got that great post credit scene of Venom Let There Be
Yeah.
Carnage, and then Spider Man happens and he's just sitting at the bar and he never made it, and it's a funny gag, but it's also like, then why did they tease it in the last movie? If anything, have that be a surprise in No Way Home, and then we'd be like, oh my god, it's Venom, rather than getting our hopes up at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage. And I think this is another example of like people are going to interpret it one way or the other, but either way, I don't think the end result is going to be satisfying because they really just haven't put a lot of thought into this. Unless they have, and I'm wrong, and I'll eat my words in a little while. But I think
Mm.
because of how eh and bad Morbius was, I just can't see them really following through with this unless they do another Venom that is amazing, and then they do like the Craven movie and it ends up being a hit. But I just don't think their track record is really gonna help them in their universe building when the MCU is just doing it so much better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's hard to compete with the MCU, you know?
Yeah.
They really have like the best of the best um handling everything for them.
Hmm.
But
And even
my
yeah, go
my
ahead.
biggest
Sorry.
issue with the post-credit scene deal was that it didn't make sense to me, because at the end of Spider-Man: Homecoming, the post-credit scene for Spider-Man: Homecoming is another inmate coming up to Michael Keaton being like, "Hey, word on the street is you know who Spider-Man is, so like a bunch of us are, gonna get out of here and go after him." And then Michael Keaton being like appreciative that, Peter Parker spared his life, saved his daughter's life, is like, "You know what? I'm gonna do this kid this solid and I'm not gonna give his identity up." And so you think he like kind of comes around and has a change of heart, when now he's
It
brought into a different universe and is like, "Let's go take down
it
Spider-Man."
it makes no sense. If they really wanted to do the Sinister Six thing, what they should have done is have, because I forget who he's talking to in the jail, but have that guy get blown into this
I think he's
universe.
just some random guy, to
That
be
because
honest.
then that would contradict Michael Keaton thing, or just recast Vulture and have a different Vulture just approach Morbius, or have Venom approach Morbius and say, "Hey, something weird just happened, and like apparently I blame Peter Parker. We got to find Peter Parker, and then maybe you can introduce Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker back into the Sonyverse."
Mm,
There's so many other things they could have done, but I think getting Michael Keaton, it was just kind of like, well, you have one more in your contract, let's do it. Like, it was just so weird, especially because, and I hate this, they made Michael Keaton a part of the marketing because they knew they weren't going to get as many butts in the chairs if it was just
mm,
Morbius. And they said, you know what? If we have Michael Keaton, MCU fans are going to come to us because they're going to want to see how it ties to Spider Man. And then if you went into that movie,
right.
and we did it because we podcast, but if you went into that movie because you're a Spider Man fan and you want to see how this connects, you are going to be severely disappointed when you see this movie because
Mm,
he isn't even
yeah.
shown until the post credit scene, and all the scenes that they mention Spider-Man or any of the humor, like I'm Venom, haha, just kidding, I'm Dr. Michael Morbius at your service, sir. All those moments from the trailer that sold you on the film to get you to the theater, and people were apprehensive going to the theater, but if you are going to the theater, something motivated you to go. And now you're basically saying, ha, fuck you. All the stuff we showed you in the trailer is not really going to happen in this movie. The stuff that you're here to see isn't really what you came here to see. You know, like if Michael Keaton had been a consistent part throughout and like had a few scenes here and there, maybe it's a better outcome. But it seems like they baited the fans by putting Michael Keaton in the trailer only to make him part of this weird universe building thing where he's part of another universe and now he's in this universe. I think at this point Sony needs to just hand over all the characters to the MCU, or the MCU needs to say you can have Spider-Man back and just do your own thing. Like I really do, because I think it's getting too complicated trying to borrow characters between franchises. It's not working.
Sure.
I mean, that's my little rant, but I just that post-credit scene is where I went from this movie was kind of dull to like this is fucking ridiculous. Like why are we doing this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree, Dale. Honestly, I walked out of that post-credit scene thinking like, Sony, I feel like you just gotta give it up because
Exactly.
I was like, "Gee, I'm like, big Disney is coming for us all. We're all gonna be working for Disney one day. Just let Big Daddy Disney buy you and
Yeah.
fix it.
The
Like
Infinity
they
Gauntlet has
will make
Pixar.
all the pain go away,
Yeah,
you
the
know?"
Infinity Gauntlet has Pixar, it has the Muppets, it has Star Wars, it has Marvel. Give it Spider-Man. Give it the Spider-Man villains over. You will get a good paycheck, Sony. And then you know what you can do, Sony? You can start doing continue the Spider-Verse stuff. That's good. You know, like find other projects that you can really amp up and let this stuff go, or just tell these stories. Like Venom on his own, it's a good little 2-movie package. Make a third Venom
Mhm.
movie, make it a trilogy, call it a day. Make the Kraven the Hunter movie, but you don't have to relate everything to Spider-Man if he's owned by the other company that
Yeah.
they don't necessarily have the right. Like I don't know how that contract works, but
Yeah.
like why does everything have to tie into something bigger nowadays? And I think that's a problem that the MCU has set for other franchises that just can't live up to it. Same thing we saw with the DCEU, and I know you haven't seen those, but like Batman vs Superman, they added Wonder Woman to it and they teased the Flash in it and Aquaman. It's like you didn't need to do all that because you're doing it
Mhm.
all in one movie and it becomes a little bit cluttered and messy. The MCU is the only franchise I've seen that has like just sprinkled it and like thought it out all the way through to where it feels natural within the progression of the story. Nothing feels shoehorned in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, but like it's all well thought out. And I just think these other franchises are just trying too hard to be something else that they're not, and they shouldn't need to. They could be
Yeah.
what they are and still, you know, if every movie in the Sonyverse was like Venom, Let There Be Carnage, we'd be fine. But because every movie wants to be something bigger, we get shit like this. So,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, it's hard, Dill, because everything is economically driven and they're
Yeah.
seeing how well these movies are doing and they're like, how do we pull those audiences? And it's team up movies. That's
Yeah.
what people are going out to
Like,
see.
if you're gonna sell Michael Keaton in the trailer, at least give him 1 or 2 scenes in the actual movie. Like
Yeah.
he's in
No, I
your
agree.
trailer. Like the post credits is supposed to be like a tease for the next movie. By putting the post credits in your trailer, you're basically teasing 2 movies ahead in your trailer. It doesn't make sense. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we spent enough time talking about it. It's a recommendation kind of sort of for Kelsey if you want to just test the waters and see what it's all about. For me, I don't think you should waste your time. But again, if you're devoted Marvel fans like us and you want to just see everything, go for it. I mean, like back before the MCU, most superhero movies were not great. That's why X-Men and the Spider-Man movies, like that's why they stood out, because they were so used to getting like the Fantastic Fours and the Howard the Ducks and all
Mm,
that jazz. So like I guess I shouldn't complain that much because we still do have great stuff coming out, including Moon Knight, which we're giving you an episode 2 review for next week. We did episode 1 this week. It was a twofer, an exciting 80 or 90 minutes of footage for y'all this week. Talking about Marvel. I'm a little burnt out, but Kelsey, do you have any last words about Morbius? I know I don't know if I want to tack on a star rating to this, but do you have a score maybe that you want to give it?
I didn't score it,
No.
but
Yeah.
like on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 to
Yeah.
yeah, 1 to 10, I'd give it like a 4 maybe.
I'll split it in half. I'll give it a 2. I'm not gonna say it's a 1 just because there are some moments that are like interesting, but um, yeah. And I honestly think if it had been so bad it was enjoyable, I think it would be a lot of fun to talk about. But this is
Yeah.
just it just is what it is.
No,
Anyway,
I get you, Dill.
um, yeah, April Fools. I loved it. Just kidding. Yeah, I'm tired, so I'm gonna go to bed. My socials are down there. You can follow me all those places. Kelsey, where can they find you?
At You can find me on Instagram at Kelsey A. Kilpatrick. You can find me on TikTok at Cause13, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Cause Productions.
That's right. So everyone, we'll be back next week with Moon Knight episode 2 spoiler review. If you saw Morbius, let us know in the comments of this video what you thought of Morbius. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you the biggest fan of Morbius? Are you the least biggest fan, the smallest fan of Morbius? I don't know. And what do you think of this post-credit scene? And be courteous if you do spoil the post-credit scene in the comments below. Like, put a spoiler warning. And if you're listening to us, head on to YouTube and join the discussion. Let us know in the comments what you think. And if you just want to hang out on YouTube, on the podcast app, and give us a rating, share it with your friends, like spread the word, because we got a lot of good stuff coming up. It's only April, but we got a lot of stuff coming up. Moon Knight, then Doctor Strange is coming. We will have trivia every single month for you as well. We'll fit it in there. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.